Brian, one interesting aspect of all of this with Syria is Israel's activities since Assad was toppled. Talk to me about that if you could.
Yeah, so Israel has conducted an air campaign into Syria to destroy a lot of the strategic assets that Assad held, stuff like chemical weapons, missiles, those sorts of things. They've also gone after Assad military bases and that sort of stuff. In addition to all that, they have created what they're calling a buffer zone in southwestern Syria, just outside of the Golan Heights. They're moving in there to prevent any sort of situation from emerging out of the kind of chaotic situation in Syria that could threaten the Israeli state. Israel, as you know, after the October 7 attacks, has really had a very different security mindset, and they're really not willing to take any risk with their national security right now, which is why I think you see this very assertive policy developing as it relates to Syria.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because I was going to ask you about, the sort of this more emboldened attitude towards a very proactive, preemptive strikes. And I don't know that before 7 October, if this situation in Syria had happened, that Israel would have considered the same moves.
Yeah, they probably would have gone after the chemical weapons and the missiles, but I don't think they would have gone so far as to go into the disengagement zone and go into Syria. I thought that was a pretty big step, and it really drives into focus again, like I mentioned, the changes in Israel after October 7th. I mean, to kind of put it into comparison, the October 7 attacks per capita, had they occurred in America, would have killed like 50,000 50,000 Americans, which is just an unfathomable number.
Yeah, I suspect that is speculation, but I suspect the Iranian regime, the IRGC in particular, probably regrets giving a green light to the 7 October attacks. So let's talk about that just for a second. Where does all this leave the Iranian regime?
It leaves them in a very, very bad and vulnerable position. So obviously, since October 7th, they have, for all intents and purposes, lost Hamas as a military organization in the Gaza Strip. Hezbollah is badly weakened. Now you have the fall of Assad. So prior to the fall of Assad, the theory from the Iranian side was, well, Hezbollah is badly weakened, but we can ship more weapons, trainers through Syria. They'll get to Lebanon. They'll rebuild Hezbollah pretty fast, and we'll be in pretty good shape. Now they've lost that. So they're going to need to rebuild some way to reconstitute some of Hezbollah's forces, providing them with weapons and those sorts of things. So I think in the coming months, you're going to see Iran try to think about how to do that. But I think you're also liable to see in the coming years, Iran really rethink its overall security strategy in the Middle East in a way that it hasn't in decades. And I think that's going to be a really important thing to watch, especially as we go in to a new U.S. administration.
Well, and the supreme leader is 85 years old and reportedly not in the best of health, and they've been talking already about the succession plan. So what that strategy looks like is going to be down to I suspect, a different supreme leader. And the IRGC, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the IRGC is angling to play more of a role in who that will be at the end of the day. So with the Iranian regime, is there a sense that they're done in Syria, or is there a sense that perhaps they'll come to some accommodation with the new government, whatever that new government looks like? What do you think about that?
I don't know. I think there's a sense that they're going to try. I don't know how successful they will be. Obviously, HTS and the rebels writ large have been fighting the Iranians for years at this point, so there's no love lost there. And I think that's a really important piece of context to keep in mind. But at the same time, I don't think Iran necessarily sees itself as bounded by this government in power. I think that it will try to work with this government, but I also think Iran will try to get its hooks into other organizations in Syria, try to rebuild some sort of resistance network in Syria. In fact, they've talked a little bit about this. The Supreme Leader said just the other day in a speech about Syria, he said, well, the Syrian youth will rise up again, just like the Iraqi youth rised up against the U.S. occupation of Iraq between 2003 and 2011, clearly alluding that there is some idea in his mind that, hey, maybe we can build some sort of resistance organizations in Syria to fight this so-called occupying government.